One day, I got a call from Dad, who lives on his pension. "Thanks for sending $30 every month. It helps with the cat's food."
What? I've been sending $1,000 a month.
Without missing a beat, I replied, and Dad, sounding puzzled, said,
"Huh?"
And then silence fell. I quickly checked the automatic transfer set up for Dad and pulled out my debit card to review the transactions. To my shock, the details revealed something astounding. That's when I finally understood the root of it all. It was the moment my decade-long trust in Timothy completely shattered.
"Give me back all my money, now."
I confronted Timothy as soon as he got home, but he just played dumb and was utterly unhelpful. However, his attitude fully opened my eyes. I was determined to expose his true colors and bring everything to light. As I glared at him, avoiding his provocations, he seemed to realize I was up to something and his expression turned serious. "My name is Lily. I've had a dream since I was a child. To become an astronomer and unravel the mysteries of the universe. Though not particularly good at studying, I excelled in science and math, leading me to choose a science-focused high school and later, a faculty of science and engineering in college. During my college years, I engaged in various experiments, observations, and research with my professor, and my only career choice post-graduation was a research institute. However, I soon faced a harsh reality. Unfortunately, a research career alone wasn't enough to live on, so I ended up working at a regular company, becoming an employee. Here, I used my knowledge to get ahead of my peers, and that's where I met Timothy. He was 4 years my senior, holding a section chief position at the time. Mature and guiding, I was drawn to Timothy and initiated the relationship, leading to a smooth married life. We were blessed with 2 children, Donald and Sophia. Now, Donald is 18 and a senior in high school, while Sophia is 16 and a freshman in high school. Both attend schools far from home and live in dormitories. So, it's just Timothy and me now, like before the kids were born. I was 27 when I had Donald, and I left my job then. It was possible to continue working, but having seen the struggles of balancing work and motherhood among my colleagues, I knew how hard it was. Timothy said he'd help, but he wasn't very attentive during my pregnancy, and he even missed the birth, citing a welcome party for new employees. No, to be precise, he showed up after Donald was born, red-faced and in high spirits. At that moment, I felt nothing but disgust. So, when Timothy said, "Don't worry. I'll support you too, Lily. Just focus on your job. We'll share the household and parenting," I could hardly believe him. And that's why I quit, a decision I never regretted. Firstly, Timothy never kept his word. Whenever Donald cried, he'd say, "Hey, he's crying. Smells like a diaper, doesn't it? Oh, and we're out of milk. Maybe you should go buy some?" His eyes were always glued to his mobile phone. Not once looking at me or Donald. I couldn't have managed work in that state. The area we live in has fierce competition for daycare, and it's tough for working families to get a spot for kids under a year old. It's easier to get in from the toddler group, so I plan to return to work around that time. 2 years after Donald, Sophia was born. Even with Donald entering the terrible 2s and Sophia being a newborn, Timothy still left all the housework to me.
"Hey, can't you help out a bit? Like, at least going to the store for diapers or milk?"
I'd ask, but Timothy would always respond, "That's a mother's job, right? I'm the breadwinner of this family, earning our living. Let me relax at home, will you?" Friends often told me to divorce him in such a situation, but if it were that easy, I would have done it long ago. If we didn't have a mortgage or car loans, and if we didn't have children, I'm sure I would have divorced such a husband without a doubt. But the environment still isn't easy for single mothers raising children. There are plenty of companies that outright refuse to hire you if you have kids. I know this because a friend of mine hit that wall and now, she and her 3 kids are on welfare. The more I thought about it, the more my feelings for Timothy cooled. If he sees himself just as a provider, then I'll think of him that way too. But I didn't want to make the kids feel bad, so I tried to keep a calm home environment without any arguments. Once the kids were older and things settled down, an acquaintance offered me a job as a teacher and a researcher at a vocational school. I was happy to finally pursue my dream of being a researcher, using the knowledge and experience from my corporate days. But Timothy didn't seem too pleased when I told him about it. The reason was simple. He was jealous that I would be earning more than him.
You know, women are in a tough spot in society without a man. And yet, here you are, showing off. Can't you even consider your husband's feelings a little?
I had an inkling, but Timothy was too proud of himself and was a bit frightened of women doing better than him. He was often harsh with the kids as well, and I had to step in to defend them. But I needed to work too, to save at least enough to send our 2 kids to college. I tried convincing him, but Timothy was just sarcastic about me working, and that's when our relationship really started to sour. Finally, when I was settled in my job and had a stable income, I brought up the subject with Timothy.
Look, I don't think there's any point in us being a couple anymore. It's not good for the kids or us, right? So, I want a divorce.
At this point, I had a decent income and the kids were more independent, so even without Dad, we could manage. I understand that divorce isn't great for kids. But I started to doubt whether me enduring everything was truly for their benefit. However, Timothy flat out refused to divorce and even said,
having both parents is definitely better for raising kids. Kids from divorced families tend to behave badly, don't they?
His basis for saying this was unclear. Probably just an excuse to guilt trip and keep me tied down. Still, I couldn't say everything Timothy said was wrong. Having both parents together is indeed better. That would be an undeniable fact. Kids are pure creatures, for better or worse. If any of their friends found out about our divorce, they might ask out of curiosity. I might be okay, but Donald and Sophia could get hurt. So, even when Timothy spouted his nonsensical theories, I couldn't talk back and ended up not being able to divorce. That's when I decided to change my perspective. Timothy might not be a great husband or father. But he's never cheated and he provides for the family. He also doesn't have any expensive hobbies and only spends about $20 a month on mobile games. He never gambles and even pays for the kids' activities. In that regard, I had no complaint. But his actions and words were often too much. To Donald, who he saw as his heir, Timothy would say things like,
"Listen, Donald. A man should earn as much as he can. Don't ever become a part-time worker. That's just laziness. You should earn more than women and be like me. You're going to be taking over the family, so be aware of that."
Our family doesn't even have any grand achievements or history of being landowners. According to my mother-in-law, our ancestors were just ordinary farmers. So, fortunately, there were no complaints or weird theories from the in-laws towards Donald. But with Sophia, Timothy taught her unbelievable things.
Sophia, listen. Women can only survive in this society by getting married. So once you graduate high school, work and contribute to the family, support your brother.
I've never met anyone who differentiated between men and women like this before. Thinking that this person is my husband made me feel indescribable. It's an anachronism at its finest. Every time Timothy lectured the kids like that, no matter how much I negated his outdated ideas, the stubborn Timothy never changed his mind. Maybe because of that, by the time Donald entered middle school, he was rebellious and often clashed with Timothy. Sophia, on the other hand, would go out with me but refused to go anywhere if Timothy was coming along. Timothy, of course, seemed not to care. As the kids grew and left home for high school, the brunt of Timothy's nitpicking shifted back to me. He accused me of looking down on him as a husband because I had a research job, or of acting superior despite his college being overwhelmingly more prestigious than mine. Sometimes, he would even talk about my earnings to others, playing the pitiful husband, as if it was all my fault. I never once belittled Timothy for his education or job, yet he would put himself down and talk as if I were the one saying those things. Ignoring his antics led to him calling me a foolish wife for not listening to her husband. The only silver lining was that the kids weren't around to witness this. Thinking he would agree to a divorce once they were independent, I decided to endure a few more years. Then one day, I got a call from Dad. Since Mom had passed away, my 66-year-old dad was living a modest life on his pension and savings, far away. He's always been frugal, never indulging in luxuries, except for adopting a few cats a year ago. There shouldn't have been anything unusual. Usually, he only called about the kids or for my birthday. But today, out of the blue, he called and said something unbelievable.
Thanks for the $30 you send every month. It helps with the cat food.
I couldn't help but respond.
What? I've been sending $1,000 a month?
Then Dad, sounding puzzled, said,
Huh?
And silence ensued between us. What was Dad talking about? I reorganized my thoughts and reiterated to Dad.
I've been transferring $1,000 to your account every month. So what do you mean by $30?
After hearing me out, Dad asked me to wait and then sent a photo of his transactions through SMS. Seeing the photo, I was dumbfounded. Indeed, as Dad said, my remittances were just a mere $30. I couldn't understand what was happening, but it was clear something sinister was going on beneath the surface. Dad, I'll see what I can find out here. I'll contact you as soon as possible, so please wait a little longer. I quickly ended the call. First, I pulled out the debit card I used for Dad's automatic transfers and checked the transactions. The details were shocking. That's when I finally realized the root of it all. It was the moment my years-long trust in Timothy completely crumbled. As soon as Timothy got home,
Give me back all my money, now.
I confronted him. But Timothy just played dumb, utterly unresponsive. Even worse, he joked that I was spouting nonsense and suggested I go to a hospital. I didn't realize I was so belittled that it gave me a huge shock. But at the same time, it also woke me up. I was determined to expose his true colors and unearth everything. As I glared silently, refusing to rise to Timothy's provocations, he seemed to realize I was up to something and suddenly turned serious. I slammed the debit card I had been investigating onto the table in front of Timothy. Seeing it, Timothy's frown deepened. Nonetheless, I declared,
This is the account I set up to automatically transfer $1,000 on payday. I don't use it normally, and the debit card is kept in the bedroom drawer.
Timothy couldn't say anything, just glared at me in silence. After a few tens of seconds of silence, Timothy finally began to make excuses.
Well, that's definitely strange, but even if I had been diverting it, what benefit would that be to me? Besides, you're suspecting me, but there's no proof I did it, right?
Innocent until proven guilty.
Don't you even know that?
His infuriating way of speaking irked me, especially because he had a point. He's probably smarter than me, and his cunning works just as well. If he was the type to slip up under questioning, I would have divorced him and raised the kids on my own long ago. I don't know how many times I've been frustrated by Timothy's unnecessarily sharp mind. And indeed, there's no direct evidence of Timothy doing anything. But in this house, it's just me and Timothy. Even without evidence, it's a given that Timothy is behind this. I pointed out the discrepancy in the transaction history and said,
Normally, if the transfer date I set falls on a weekend or holiday, I have it set to transfer in advance. The setting is to automatically transfer $1,000 to Dad's account on the 1st of every month. Since payday is the 25th, I'd transfer $1,000 to this account as soon as my salary was deposited.
I paused there, looking at Timothy, who seemed a bit tense. I didn't know what he was thinking, but he might be preparing an excuse for whatever I'd say next. I looked back at the debit card and continued.
So if the 1st is on a weekend or a holiday, it transfers on the 30th or 31st of the previous month. Therefore, there should be no movement of money between the 25th and 29th. Yet, the day after I put in $1,000, only $30 is sent to Dad, and the rest is withdrawn. Doesn't it seem strange that there's movement other than the automatic transfer?
Timothy stuttered for a moment, but then retorted with a laugh. Even if that's true, so what? Where's the proof that I took your debit card and withdrew the money? Even if I took nearly $1,000, what would I use it for? He had an infuriating smirk and a condescending laughter to go with it. I just stared at Timothy's face without saying a word, and thinking he had one, he suddenly became talkative. I earn decently and am not in need of money, something you, who gets the household expenses, should know best, right? And besides, I couldn't mess with those auto-transfer settings anyway. You know, as a researcher, you should be smarter than this. After rattling off his words, Timothy seemed pleased with himself, as if he had outsmarted me, and happily went to take a bath. Thinking he had beaten me in this exchange, Timothy must be really naive. Just the thought of his smug face falling apart made me want to laugh. Since he thought he had won, Timothy sang some indistinct song in the bath. And when Timothy came out, still in high spirits, I greeted him with the biggest smile. He looked surprised. What now? You still have something to say? And stepped back. I presented him with a printout of my SMS history. What's this? I asked sharply, and Timothy froze. In fact, when Dad sent the photo of the debit card, I was surprised to find unfamiliar SMS exchanges before it. I rarely use SMS. And when I do, it's mostly for login confirmation codes. I usually communicate with colleagues, friends, and kids via free messaging apps or SNS messages. That's why I hadn't noticed these exchanges, and Timothy must have cleverly chosen SMS for this reason. A conversation between Dad and me from about 10 months ago that I didn't recognize. The messages were sent under my name, but I wasn't the one who wrote them or talked to Dad. Needless to say, it was Timothy. Hey, this is you identifying yourself, right? This is Timothy, Lily's husband. How are you? Why did you contact Dad from my SMS? If you wanted to talk to him personally, you could have just asked me directly for his contact, right? As I pressed him with a smile, Timothy's triumphant expression disappeared, replaced by panic. No way, you don't use SMS, how did you find out? He was clearly flustered. His reaction made it obvious he had tampered with my mobile phone to contact Dad. Let's see, what's this? Actually, Lily is hospitalized and needs money, so we can't send you the usual amount. But we know you have cats, so we thought at least we could help with the cat food. We'll have to reduce the amount, but we'll continue sending. I read the message aloud in a monotone, and Timothy started to apologize. There's a deep reason for this. I wasn't trying to hurt you or Dad. Just believe that, please. He briefly apologized, then began to explain. He knew that I sent $1,000 every month to Dad and had agreed to it. But suddenly, Timothy needed money and thought of using this $1,000. Since he didn't have Dad's contact details, he couldn't ask him directly, and even if he did, there was no way he could ask him to slide the $1,000 over to him. So, Timothy pretended that I was sick to gain Dad's sympathy and understanding. He knew how to unlock my phone and probably sent that SMS while I was in the bath. Dad, being kind, must have believed that SMS. The reason I didn't get any worried calls from Dad was also Timothy's doing. He had told Dad that my treatment was tough, and I needed some space. So for the past 10 months, Dad hadn't contacted me. Today he must have called because enough time had passed, and he chose a neutral topic like cat food. You can't get away with this anymore. It's been 10 months, so you've stolen almost $10,000 from me. Give it back to me right now. I demanded, but Timothy broke down, saying it was impossible. He had already spent it all, paying off a secret debt. After calming down, I asked Timothy, "Can I trust you?" He nodded earnestly. Looking at him, I warned,
If you betray me again, I'll seriously come after that $10,000. You better be prepared.
Timothy nodded, trembling. He probably thought the conversation had ended there, and he appeared utterly relieved. Recently, Timothy had been extra nice, coming straight home without detours, even bringing home some cake from my favorite bakery. Though I couldn't believe how unaware he was of his own suspicious behavior, I had been quietly working on something else. When the time was right, Timothy was in for another shock. One day, as he came home in a good mood, I pointed to the living room table. Confused, Timothy looked and froze. There, filled out with my details, was a divorce application form.
What's this? We already settled the previous matter, right? I told you I'd start paying you back gradually. Lily, you forgave me, didn't you?
He said with a forced smile. I laughed derisively, like Timothy used to, and declared.
Did you really think that was the end?
Timothy, looking distraught, didn't answer, so I pulled out several documents from a drawer. Seeing them, he turned pale and let out a small scream.
So, you cheated, got her pregnant, and instead of marrying her, you agreed to pay child support. I'm astounded by your shamelessness.
Timothy never seemed to be in financial trouble, let alone needing to borrow money. I've been funding our children's education entirely, planning to use Timothy's earnings for living expenses and our retirement. Even though I earn a decent amount now, Timothy, as a department head at his company, should be making a good salary too. It was baffling why he would need to borrow money. My woman's intuition told me he was either funding an affair, a club, or someone else. Being someone who acts immediately upon deciding, I hired an internet detective for this situation. The detective provided photos of Timothy occasionally visiting a woman and handing her money. Further inquiries revealed she's a single mother now, raising a child.
So basically, you were giving her child support monthly as hush money to keep her from spilling about the affair. But she demanded $2,000, including living expenses. Thinking $2,000 was too much, you had the $1,000 I sent to Dad and stole it, right?
I stated calmly, and Timothy collapsed on the spot, making excuses.
It's not like that. It wasn't my intention. I don't deserve to end like this. Why is this happening to me?
Seeing Timothy like that, I sighed and simply asked him to sign the divorce papers. Timothy clung to my legs and pleaded.
Please, don't divorce me. I can't imagine what others would think of me at this age. And the kids might not want to see me anymore. I can't stand it. It's too hard. Please, I'm begging you.
I refused with a smile, saying,
If you don't sign, I'm fine with taking this to court.
Realizing he had no chance, Timothy signed with trembling hands. But this wasn't the end. The other woman needed to be punished too. Just asking for alimony in the divorce court seemed too lenient. She ruined my marriage and was now setting back, receiving benefits and allowances. Just thinking about it made me furious. There was still one suspicious point about the automatic transfer. I understood how Timothy was using my debit card and PIN to withdraw the money. Since we are a married couple, we shared a PIN. Money can be withdrawn just by using a debit card, and after hearing what he had been using the money for, Timothy's actions made sense. But what about the automatic transfer? Actually, I once misunderstood the remittance date and forgot to deposit money. I was glad that a polite bank employee contacted me and noticed, but this time I didn't hear from them for 10 months. Considering the previous response, I found it strange that I hadn't heard anything from them for 10 months, so I checked with my bank to see what was going on with my automatic remittances. When I checked with the bank, the transfer was somehow already cancelled. It couldn't have been done without me, and Timothy attempting it would have led to them contacting me. So, there was only one explanation. There's someone working with Timothy at the bank. That was the only way this whole thing could make sense. And so it goes without saying that Grace, a 29-year-old bank employee, was Timothy's mistress. Grace must have posed as assisting Timothy with general procedures while actually canceling my transfer. That's a clear crime. As a bank employee, she committed a crime by using her position for personal gain. Further investigation on Grace led me to an unexpected discovery, and I couldn't help but quietly fist pump. Later, I summoned both Grace and Timothy to present them with the alimony claim for the divorce court.
Since you both complied with today's summons, I'll take it as an admission to the affair. All evidence is gathered, I said.
Timothy nodded meekly, looking pale, while Grace was absorbed in admiring her nails, as if this matter was of no concern to her. She probably thinks Timothy will cover her part, so this discussion means nothing to her. This wasn't a place for a child, so she presumably made some vague excuse and left her child with her parents. Timothy was already pretty beaten up from the divorce crisis and the bail claim for the divorce trial, so I decided to let it be for now and turn to Grace, saying,
"By the way, you're applying for child support allowance as a single parent from the municipality, right? I see you've also applied for a single parent allowance at the bank. But you're receiving $2,000 from Timothy every month, aren't you? You know that's a crime, right? And may I add, it's also a crime to unilaterally cancel my automatic transfers."
Then Grace's face twisted in shock and I couldn't help but laugh to myself. She seemed to be making excuses, saying she didn't know anything about it, but I was certain because the detective had investigated into it.
"If this information is wrong, then let's call your colleague right now to verify. It might also be a good idea to ask the municipality about the conditions for receiving child support allowance and whether you qualify or not."
At that, Grace changed her attitude and apologized to me, begging,
"Please, it was just a moment of madness. I never planned to marry this man, that's why I backed off. Please don't push me and my child any further."
I was about to explode with anger at Grace, who acted as if I were the villain. The real victim in this case is undoubtedly me, and if anything, it's Grace's child who's been caught up in all this. Under no circumstances will the victims be these cheaters. Then Timothy started to defend Grace, who looked like she was about to cry. "Stop it already. Grace didn't mean any harm." Seeing Timothy like that, I snorted. He didn't seem to understand why he was being laughed at, but I wondered what kind of face he would make when he finally reached the last truth. Still laughing, I said,
"So you'll say she didn't mean any harm even after hearing that she made you pay child support and living expenses for a child that's not even yours?"
Then Grace stood up, eyes wide open and cutting me off.
"Stop it! No more!"
But Timothy, showing his pointless intelligence, went on and asked,
"Wait, so, that child isn't mine?"
Grace's face twisted, and Timothy seemed clueless. The detective had found out that Grace was getting money by claiming another man's child as Timothy's, and she was also receiving $500 a month in child support from the child's real biological father. It cost quite a bit to find all this out, but I think it was worth it to gain something much bigger. Timothy, who thought he had a perfect life, is now facing hell, and I'm sure now Grace will be joining him too. I was feeling great, but Timothy and Grace's aura was dark and heavy. But it's their own responsibility. If they can't differentiate between right and wrong, someone needs to make them realize it. Though it cost them, they finally came to understand the gravity of their actions. After getting their signatures on the divorce trial bail claim and other documents, I triumphantly submitted the divorce application, and Timothy became a stranger. I only told our children living far away that we were getting divorced, but they, being perceptive, said they were on Mom's side. I had told them they didn't need to come home for the holidays, thinking they wouldn't want to see Dad, but as soon as they heard about the divorce, they came home on the next big holiday. They didn't ask what happened, but seemed relieved when I said I got custody. I'll continue to provide for their education, and I had actually made some investments since I didn't fully trust Timothy. I believe I'll be okay in my old age. As for Timothy and Grace, they ended up with an unimaginable fate. Timothy, now divorced at this age, apparently faced rampant rumors at work. Originally belittling me, his wife, and speaking ill of female employees, he was now the subject of gossip about affairs and losing his wife's favor. Eventually requesting a department change, he was surprisingly demoted to a regional office. But Timothy didn't complain, realizing he had no place at the headquarters anymore. Moreover, he's now struggling financially due to the nearly $10,000 repayment and divorce trial bail he promised, as well as the children's education costs that he must fulfill as his parental duties. And as for Grace, she resigned voluntarily after the bank found out about what she had done. She avoided being sued by immediately returning the deceitfully obtained allowances, but lacking enough money to live, she reluctantly returned to her parents' home. After spilling everything to her parents, she faced severe reprimands. Currently, Grace works as a contract employee at the company where her dad works, with her parents managing all her finances, leaving her with no spending freedom. Her parents, being very sincere people, paid the full amount of the bail I had claimed in the divorce trial. Though they had initially fronted the money, it was good to hear they would bill it all to Grace. So, after all that, now several years had passed since the divorce. Donald has advanced to graduate school and landed a job at a major company, and Sophia, incredibly, got into medical school and is now preparing for the national medical exam next year. Even without Timothy, the kids have proudly followed their own paths, and they've even assured me they'll support me in my old age. I couldn't ask for better allies. It's incredibly gratifying to see my children grow up into great human beings, without Timothy's influence, and they are the treasures of my life.